Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15 going on 16 novels of suspense. My current novel is One Wrong Word, which you see cleverly on the door behind me. My upcoming book is called All This Could Be Yours, which comes out in September. You can remember that because it's coming out on the same day as Dan Brown's new book. So that's lovely. So every time you hear about Dan Brown's new book, you just think, oh, my friend Hank, her book is coming out that day too. All This Could Be Yours. Today, I am so honored and thrilled to introduce you to, and I have to say this, but it's just among us, so I will, one of my very favorite authors of all time. And I do not say that lightly. And I told her earlier that I was going to have a problem with not gushing, and you know me, but I love Gillian McAllister, and her brand new book, Famous Last Words, is out today in the US and was out a couple of weeks ago in the UK and is already a massive bestseller, of course. So you get two. Gillian is coming to us from the UK right now, where it is much later, 9 o'clock. Thank you so much for staying up for us.
Oh, you're welcome.
How does it feel to have two pub days?
It's fun, actually. It's nice because you get a first wave of press and then a second wave. So it's slightly more manageable. So yeah, it's good. It's fun. And each one gets its own space, you know.
How do you handle that?
I didn't sleep much last night, which is the way, isn't it? I can never conceptualize why publication is stressful. My husband was like, what's actually the problem, you know, in the middle of the night? And I was like, I don't really know. It's just stressful. So yeah, I handle it by diving into my new book where it's just me and my battered laptop that has no E key and a manuscript, you know?
I mean, I suppose that it's the anticipation of something that you don't know what is and that you really don't have any control over it. When you're writing your book, like Famous Last Words, when you're writing your book, if you don't know what's going to happen, you know you'll be able to figure it out tomorrow. But when you have a book launch, the universe, is this helping you at all? The universe is out there waiting for you. And we are so lucky to have you here today. We'll be talking about Famous Last Words, which just came out today in the US. And also I'm going to sneak in a tiny bit about Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, which if you have not read this book, you all, not right now, but as soon as this is over, run and get both of these books. But not right now, because I really want you to hear about Gillian McAllister. Plus, you could win, one of you will win a copy of Famous Last Words when we spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show. So if you are new to A Mighty Blaze, I'm going to say one more housekeeping thing before we let Gillian talk. I know it's not going to be just me talking. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the wonderful powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us reading and discovering new books and sort of keeping the community of readers and writers together. And we are still going strong and with much delight. Speaking of delight, let me introduce you briefly to Gillian McAllister. Let me tell you about our guest today. She is the New York Times bestselling author of Reese's Book Club pick, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, Just Another Missing Person, and several more bestsellers, including a Richard and Judy Book Club pick. She graduated with an English degree before working as a lawyer. She lives in England, where she now writes full time and has a husband and a dog and a child and all those things to distract her from writing her best-selling novels. Congratulations on your pub day. Sherry is here saying loved Wrong Place, Wrong Time. So clever. Sue Street is here and Renee is here. Let me just say hello to all of you, Susie Baldwin and Sherry and Vicky and London and Randy. So nice to see you all. Shannon Hansen. Emily Ross says, love her books. We love your books too, Emily, and thank you for that. So here's the thing, Gillian. We cannot talk about this book at all. I mean, just not at all. Because anything that we say, I just don't want to spoil any of it. So we'll be careful about that. So Gillian, tell us what you can about your newest book.
I will. So Famous Last Words tells the story of Camilla, who wakes up on her first day back at work after maternity leave, and her husband is not there. And for a while, she dismisses it. Maybe he had a work meeting. Maybe he had something she's forgotten about. But there is a semi-cryptic note on the kitchen counter. So she goes to work. She drops her 9-month-old at what you would call daycare as normal. And she heads on into the office. And in the foyer of her office, there is a breaking news alert that says there is a hostage situation developing in Bermondsey. And Bermondsey is where her husband works. And the hairs on the back of her neck go up, and she starts to wonder if something's wrong. And sure enough, the police arrive to her work, and they tell her that he is caught up in it, but that Luke, her husband, who is an optimist and a runner and a happy-go-lucky kind of person, is actually the gunman, and he has taken the hostages. And the novel plays out the why, and to some extent how you recover when something like that happens to you.
I mean, it's so interesting because as I'm reading this novel, as a reader, I'm completely immersed in it, in the story, and the power of it, and the shock of it, of how I would feel if that happened to me, and how we would all feel if it happened to me, to you. But the author part of my brain was saying, she's never going to be able to do this. I cannot see what the ending of this is going to be. So congratulations. You have 2-ish points of view in this book. Can you talk about the 2 main characters, the points of view?
Of course. So Cam is the true main character, I would say. She's married to the gunman. She is the recipient of the cryptic note. And possibly most importantly, she deals with words for a living. She is a literary agent, but she is also her husband's literary agent. He's a writer. And so some of the novel turns on her being able to interpret his note correctly and what he may be telling her that only she might know. The other point of view is Niall, who is the hostage negotiator. And for a while, at least, until a big twist, it's a cat and mouse thriller between Niall wanting to know what is going on in the warehouse where the hostages have been taken, and Cam wanting only to protect her husband. And after a while, those points of view diverge in a way that I hope is surprising.
You know, you were talking about Camilla, and that this is her first day back at work before she takes her, when she takes her daughter to daycare. Her maternal instincts and her love for her daughter are so purely clear in this story, and the role of the daughter is so powerful in the story. The role of what it means to be a parent, or what it means to have the responsibility for someone else. Can you talk about that? How your book is so full of love and heart. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important and why that was critical for the book?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm plotting, I talk to my father a lot, and he always says what else is going on for them. And when I think about crime novels, it can be a little bit spare on what else is going on. And I actually think, that Camilla is a mum is fairly incidental to the plot. However, people and characters do just live rich lives where they have sisters who, have their own things going on, and their parents. And in this novel in particular, I wanted to think about, nobody, I think, has a less headspace than a new mum. And I found it's really interesting to kind of pull at that and think, how can I put this character in even more pressurized a situation? And her marriage being on the line is not just that, because it's her daughter's father also. And who her daughter really becomes is dependent on whether her father is a good person or not. And I kind of found that a very interesting angle to explore.
Yes, I love that, because it's not that the plot turns on that relationship, but it affects Camilla and how she deals with her world, not only her future, but her daughter's future. And that would be so difficult. And speaking of that, there's such a massive theme of hostages in this book, not just the plot hostages, but whether a person is hostage to their family or their job or to someone else's expectations, or to each other. Can you talk a little bit about that? What, how we are all held hostage by everything that happens in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I haven't been asked that yet.
Well, your book is just out today.
I Yes, true. There's time, but it's an original question. I think in plotting, love is always stakes, and I think in many ways people are always held hostage by the people they love, because you kind of give your heart to someone else and then they can do whatever they want with it. And I think in a way, what I really set out to do was take something that I'd seen on the big screens and in a very male way. The synopsis of Famous Last Words is not unlike Die Hard. However, the tone of it is completely different. And I thought, that it's a big trope, a hostage situation, but I'd never seen it done in a way where the kind of emphasis was on marriage and love and intimacy and emotional honesty. And that's why the wife, she's not in the warehouse. We don't know what's happening in the warehouse. And my preference for kind of insight was, what if you're in the police interviewing room and you have got less idea than anybody why this has happened? And that sort of hostage situation interested me even more than the one in the warehouse, really.
Exactly. I completely see that, because Camilla is being held hostage too in this situation. Hostage to, her love for her husband and how she can't believe that he would do such a thing. Hostage to her daughter who relies on her. Hostage to her future. Plus, she's still a literary agent and she has to go figure out how she's still going to work and make a living while this is all going on. So this hostage situation in the warehouse is putting her in a hostage situation as well.
Yes, exactly that. I'm glad you kind of saw the theme of it. And Niall really is held hostage to his job in a way, because he kind of can't live without it, but he's not very happy with it.
Exactly. And that's another list of the people that's why one of the lovely things about this book, one of the many lovely things about Famous Last Words, is that the hostage negotiator himself is a hostage to his job, from his bosses, from his responsibilities, and from his own decision making. I mean, so much of this book rests on making a decision. And what happens at that critical moment when you have to rely on your instinct and your experience and your gut and your, crossed fingers about what to do that will domino so many people's lives. Can you talk about that a little bit? Niall makes decisions and Camilla makes decisions and Luke makes decisions. Everybody makes decisions.
Yeah. And really, the reason behind it all is based on a kind of split-second decision. And the moment where Camilla sees the breaking news, and she really knows then, that is a split second. But the most important aspect is, Niall has got to have the right judgment on, is it more dangerous to let this play out, or is it more dangerous to go in? And all hostage negotiators face that moment of, they call it dynamic entry, where if you go in, possibly somebody's going to end up dead, because the police go in armed, the hostage taker is armed, and people have a massive survival instinct and will do, reckless things. And they don't really have much sight into what's going on in the warehouse. And in the research of it, what I found most interesting was a hostage negotiator said to me, where the gun is pointing is massively important in terms of what you do. And he specifically said, if the hostage taker is tapping the gun on people's heads and is up and is like pacing and is angry, you're way more likely to go in than if they're sitting despondently with the gun hanging down by their side. And those things are very nuanced, but many lives depend on what Niall does and when, most of all Camilla's.
Well, the tension is so high, so much in this novel throughout. We're talking about Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister. Then your knowledge of hostage negotiation came through so clearly in this book. It's so smart and so insidery. Talk a little bit more about that research. How did you do that?
Well, I realized early on that I really needed to actually research this in a way that wasn't just reading a lot about it and reading books about it. So I found the email address of a hostage negotiator who I still am in touch with to this day. And this was in 2022. So he and I started emailing. But everything he said actually spawned more questions, because a lot of things you can kind of get the hang of it. Like if you write a police procedural, you can have a half day with a police officer and you'll kind of know, okay, in general, this is how it works. But with hostage negotiation, it's so specialist and the situations are so different that sort of isn't the case. So, I mean, long story short, I am a level 1 hostage negotiator now, because I ended up on his course. But it was the most fantastic day because I learned a lot for my book, but I also learned a lot about what it is to be a human and what it is to be empathetic and how to parent better. So actually, what started off as fact finding became a course about, if somebody is having the worst day of their life and they've made a catastrophic decision, what do you do to get them out of it? And actually, that requires humanity above all else. And the CIA and the FBI and the Met in Britain, they all use the same 6 steps for negotiating a hostage situation. And steps 1 to 5 are listening. And that is all people actually want. We've all had an argument with somebody where we were given a solution, but we just wanted to be listened to. And that is the cornerstone of hostage negotiation, is empathy.
I mean, it's so interesting to think about you as a parent being a hostage, being a negotiator, and also sort of having to tap in to what someone else needs, not just what you need, but how to diffuse a situation so that it diminishes from the highest of torque in the stakes. And Camilla has to learn that through the book as well. Again, we're talking about Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister. Julie is here, and Vicki is here, and Renee is here. So nice to see you all, and Randy. Camilla has to learn how to deal with her life as well, and how to balance her life and what other people who come into her life might need. And another one of so let me just go back to hostage though, because this is so interesting. You being a sort of level 1 hostage negotiator, has that changed your life, the way you look at situations that you're in now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about it at least every day. Yeah, because actually the hostage negotiator actually told me things that I didn't know that are important to know about humans. So yes, I think about it all the time.
Well, we need to know one important thing that we need to know about humans. I mean, how has it changed your perspective on dealing with people?
Well, 2 things. With parenting, what he said to me was, imagine you're an adult who has no idea if you've just had a nap or woken up in the morning. You don't know. You can't tell the time. You have no idea what's going to happen next. You're at the park, you're having fun, and suddenly somebody picks you up and puts you in the car. Like, you're going to kick off about that because you have no idea what's going on. And as an adult, we do have ideas, but as toddlers, we don't. And so now, if or every day I talk at length to my son about what is happening, what day it is, what time it is, who is going to have him next, who's going to wake him up. You're having a nap, you're having dinner, then this, then we need to put your shoes on. And he's very biddable, and possibly that is his natural personality. But I think it's actually taking the time to contextualize things for people. The second thing I would say is that a lot of people they don't explain why they're doing what they're doing. And actually, my son actually said to me the other day, can I have an ice cream in the supermarket? And I said, no. And then I thought, well, I'm going to explain, because I could see he was like going to kick off. And I said, well, it's really messy. And so what will happen is it will drip everywhere, and then somebody will have to clean it up. And actually, he didn't know that. And he did accept it. And it's actually like that, like human to human, rather than I'm going to tell you what to do and you have to take my word for it. So I would say that. And I would say the third thing in general, so not parenting, is that all humans require certainty in order to go about their lives. And what upsets us more than anything, hence book launch anxiety, is uncertainty. And so sometimes delivering hard facts that are certain can help to diffuse a situation. So like a typical example in parenting would be, I understand you don't want to leave the park, but we are going to. And you can decide when, and you can say, we're going to do 3 more things, but then we are leaving. And actually using that declarative language actually diffuses a lot of situations, because people actually are spinning in the void of, I don't know when this is going to happen. I don't know why it's going to happen. And actually, you can kind of be quite focused in how you communicate with people, and they will respond to that in quite amazing ways, actually.
This is completely fascinating.
Every press interview I do is about hostage negotiation now, because I go, well, I've been on a course. Here's all these interesting things. But it is interesting, isn't it?
I mean, Julie is saying you've certainly reframed the way we're looking at certain relationships. And it is a way of opening your mind. And what you were talking about just a moment ago about contextualization, which is so interesting, because I was thinking about another thing I noticed in your book is sort of the theme of something being upside down, the world being upside down, whether it's Camilla's house or that everything is different from how you expected it to be. When you have the rug pulled out from under you and you're completely flipped over. Can you talk about that a little bit, that theme of upside down?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it has its roots in, I always think I like to know exactly where my characters live. And nobody lives in a house that's just a normal house to them. Some people have a funny cupboard in the kitchen that they store things in, or, they have a dumb waiter, or they have a weird staircase. And I always like to have that kind of quality where you remember things. And I viewed a house that was inverted. So bedrooms downstairs, living quarters upstairs. And it just stuck in my head as like, a percentage of people have a house like that. And I've never, really, I thought it'd be interesting to write about. And it does tie with the theme of, waking up in a world where you don't recognize anything. And, I wanted it to serve a purpose, and the layout of the house ultimately does serve an interesting purpose. But mostly I did just want to kind of concentrate on that. Camilla says the moment the police tell her husband has taken hostages, she says she feels like she falls through a trapdoor, because it's that visceral moment of shock, and your kind of wise mind knows nothing is actually ever going to be the same again, but you almost can't process that for quite some time, I think.
The idea that nothing is ever going to be the same again is such a touchstone in so many of your books, certainly in Famous Last Words, when Camilla finds out what her husband is involved in, and also in Wrong Place, Wrong Time, when a thing happens that did happen, as you say, declaratively did happen, and there's no way out of that. How is this person going to process what happens next? I mean, in both of these books, you set up an impossible situation, something that we as readers cannot even fathom how is going to come out, and how can it come out to be a satisfying book, which is so important. How top of mind, I mean, how much did you know going in, and how top of mind is it for you to have the reader at the end say, oh, I never saw that coming, but that was fantastic?
Yeah, that is almost the most important thing for me, because anybody can promise things in chapter 1, but ultimately, if somebody reads your next book and if they want to buy your books and be your reader, which is the ultimate privilege, then you have to deliver on the experience. And for me, I'm the most gripped when it is a high wire act, and I think, how on earth, like, there is no solution to this novel. And actually, when I do pitch things, if people are risk averse because it seems like there's no solution, that's actually music to my ears, because I know if I can find the solution, then I've got a super gripping book on my hands, because it feels impossible, right?
Well, yes. And when do you know that when you're writing?
Well, it does vary. I prefer to know at the outset. I don't always. For my novel that I've just finished editing, I always knew. I always knew with Wrong Place, Wrong Time. Famous Last Words, I did not always know. And that is, I think, because it's particularly a high wire act. You know, you might be able to imagine, when might you commit a crime and run away, you know, but when would you take 3 hostages is, you have to have a quite an amazing reason. And it took me a very long time to come up with it. So I'm glad it landed for you.
Oh my goodness, more than landed. Absolutely more than landed. And I'm looking at the comments here. Sue Street says we could talk about this all day. And Julie says 100%. We have so many good questions. Don't forget to leave a question or a comment to be
Yes, please do. Leave all your hostage negotiation questions.
Yeah, we'll take care of that. Jillian will take care of that. The high wire act, though, you knew that you had a character who was found having taken 3 hostages, and you didn't know why, and you just wrote it anyway. How does your mind work that you say, okay, here we go? How does that process unfold for you?
I think the first step is that I say my wedding vows to the hook. So, like, I come up with a hook and I have such a reaction to it that I'm married to it. And I know if I can figure this out, I know that book will resonate. I know that when I pitch it in one line, people will want to read it. And that's the most important thing. So that kind of gives me the rocket fuel that I need to essentially start the process of trial and error. You know, there were many, many, many things I discarded. I had a huge twist in the first draft that it was not a hostage situation at all. It was a recording. So when they go in, there's no one there. And then I couldn't get that to work, and it didn't really make sense. And it felt like a cheat on the premise, but that was one solution. And what I do tend to do is, when I have a premise, I come up with the first 10 reasons why someone would do it. And I don't write any of them because they're what everybody would think. And then I start to get into the other kind of motivators. And that's where things start to get interesting for me. And it is about thinking outside the box. Like with the example of the recording, although it didn't work, it was out of the box thinking, because my brain kind of suggested, well, maybe it isn't a hostage situation, you know? And I personally didn't like that. I wanted it to be what it was. But yeah, I think a lot of it is that trial and error, and then kind of playing with the reader. And, you know, Luke does something about 20% into the novel that I hope you kind of have a reaction of like, oh my God, like he's made it a lot worse. And I like that ratcheting up of tension.
But you didn't know it was going to happen until it happened.
Well, I do plan, but then I don't always stick to the plan. And very often in that sort of unfolding first draft, all I'm doing is getting words down that I know are not going to stay, but I'm observing how I feel about them and which things are piquing my interest. I'm doing it now, so I'm able to talk much more viscerally about a first draft now, because I'm 20,000 words into a book. And it's mostly a process of like, what is interesting me about this, and where do I kind of, what feels good, what doesn't, and then I kind of go where more things feel good, you know.
And sometimes things just start to work. They start to
Yes.
mesh and braid together, and you think, okay, this is alive now
Yes.
somehow.
Yeah.
Think about that. I mean, you're writing down 10 things that aren't going to work, because that's
Yeah.
what we can all think of, which we probably could not, but let's say we could think of 10 of them. But what do you think about your brain power, your capabilities of being able to solve a problem that you created?
It's strange, isn't it? Because I very often in the writing process think, why have I tied myself in knots when I'm the creator? But I sort of think getting into the maze is part of it. And getting out is the fun bit. And I think real creativity relies in the problem solving, actually. Because there's a very big twist in Just Another Missing Person that is very sort of out of the box. And it's I think it's I like to come up with those things that are more like not just a reveal of like this person did it or why, but like what assumptions has the reader made that I can turn on their head. And I prefer those sort of more conceptual twists, I think.
This is Betty selling. Wow, the more I hear about this book, the more I want to read it. Absolutely so, Betty Fellows, famous last words. I'm so with you on that, because there's a sort of Agatha Christie. I mean, I love Agatha Christie, but in the end, you know, that it sort of feels like she's just decided it's Professor Plum, and she's going to make the book be that it's Professor Plum.
Yeah.
In your books, and in the books that I love the most, it's that the prism turns, and that the reader wasn't looking at it the right way, because we have certain expectations because we're so smart about how a book is going to be, and then it doesn't turn out to be that way because we weren't looking there. It's like this sort of sleight of hand that you're so genius at.
Yes, that is one of my favorite things to do, really, because actually once you know you're going to do it, all you need to do is make the assumption feel credible.
Yes.
So in Wrong Place, Wrong Time, what I had to do there was come up with an alternate theory that made sense. So then when you know the real reason, you're completely blindsided because the story of the red herring made sense. And it is about presenting, like I so often have a whiteboard that says, what is the truth and what do I want the reader to think? And what I want the reader to think is paramount.
So you actually write that down.
Oh, yes. It's very conscious.
I'd love to see that someday. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Well, and I have so many more questions for you, but you're such a beautiful and deliberate writer with such a recognizable style of sort of very, and I say this in the most complimentary of way, very simple layering of language, which then sort of unfolds into this gorgeous beauty and emotion, so that we're so drawn into it and then just enwrapped with, if that's a word, with the beauty of the writing. And then the structure of this book is, it starts out sort of broadly and then really narrows, and you feel the story sort of come to a point at the end. And it's just so gorgeous. Is any of that in your consciousness, or are you just writing a story?
A bit of both, I think. More and more, the novel I've just finished it works on two levels, and it was very conscious. It's about a couple who go on holiday to Texas, and their teenage daughter is kidnapped, and they receive an old-fashioned ransom. And the ransom says, don't call the police, meet us at this lay-by, and be prepared to perform a task. And the husband wants to tell the police, and the wife decides, I'm going to this lay-by, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my child back. And what I liked about the writing of it was, this was a child who was about to leave home anyway. She's a daughter. It's a very feisty mother and daughter relationship. And the kidnap worked kind of as an allegory for your child leaving you. And the fact that it is naturally a very uneven relationship where your child is everything to you, but for them, you're just their mum who was there kind of there at the start of the relationship, and is somebody you might call every now and again in adulthood. And I really wanted to unpack how that feels as the parent who's given up everything, and kidnap was actually like a metaphor for that for me. So it is more conscious with some books. With others, readers actually pull things out that I had not realized were in there.
And that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so great. And so often, I wrote Famous Last Words. Well, my son was 2 days old when I started it. And I think my life was upside down. And I did not really consciously know that until it's come up in press.
I love that. I think the idea that we as human beings are the only creatures that can make something brand new out of only our imagination. And even when we write it, we don't really understand totally the depth of what we ourselves has written. That's just the best kind. That is the best kind of magic. I am such a fan of this book, you all. I know that I have made that clear. I hope I have made that supremely clear to you all. Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister, as well as the absolutely iconic Wrong Place, Wrong Time. Do not miss either of these novels. Let's take some questions, if you will. Gillian, do you have time for a couple of questions? I'm going to do that. Can you mention that indie that I can buy a signed copy from? Randy says.
Yes, there are book people in the US have some. So that is, if you go to my Instagram, there's a link in my bio with all the signed editions. So you can go and get one from the indies there.
Terrific. And do that, Randy. That is marvelous. Randy is with Barnes and Noble, but he wants a signed copy. Catherine says, how do you balance your hours writing with medical issues? I don't know about this. I'm glad you're doing well, she says.
Yeah, so my medical issues are that about a long time ago now, about 15 years ago, I had mononucleosis, you call it, and I was bedridden for like 2 years. I was like, didn't leave my house for at least 1 year, was a wheelchair user in the second year. And it has left my body, I would say, more vulnerable than other people's. They don't really know. They thought I might have lupus, but they don't really know. You know what the medical profession is like with chronic illnesses. It's not the best, at least not for me. And actually, the balance is difficult, actually, because I would say I'm about 90% of most people, in that when my son was a newborn, I formula fed so that I could sleep more, and I'm very happy to tell people that. And my husband did a lot of the night feeds because I just wasn't physically capable. And the way it impacts me now is, this time of year where we've had cold and flus, I take longer to recover and get run down easily. And I pick up everything my son has. And the way that I manage it is that I have to rest slightly more than other people, and it eats into work time. And it's frustrating for me on an ongoing basis. So I feel it looks like this gilded lifestyle of the best-selling author, but I'm there very, very often handing baby to childminder and then thinking I'm absolutely screwed. I've got to go back to bed. So it's the same reality as it is for lots of chronically ill people.
It's really even more inspirational than that. If you're 90% there physically, that you're 10 million% there with talent, because it's just enormous and unstoppable, clearly. Do we have another question? Thank you for your honesty. Was this always the title, says Shannon Hansen. I love it. And this is such a layered title. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it took me forever to come up with this title, and I'm so glad, because sometimes when it takes a long time, you end up with a compromise. But actually, yeah, this book was called Husband Unknown for a really long time, and I kind of liked it, but I think it did sound a little bit prosaic. And I was talking to my writer friend, Beth O'Leary, who wrote The Flat Share. You might know of her. And she said, what is it really about? And, you know, that quintessential question for writers, isn't it? And we had already done some edits, so I had a bit of clarity. And I said, I sort of think it's actually about words. Like, you know, it's about literary agents and writers and this note and the intention behind what you say and what you do. And I literally put words, idioms into Google and then saw famous last words and thought, that's it. So yeah, it's funny how it sometimes works, isn't it?
On so many levels, famous last words works. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, oh, there was this, and there was this, and there was this, and there was this in the book. And some of that has got to be intentional, and some of it has just got to be writer serendipity.
Yeah, and I could talk endlessly about writer serendipity because, you know, there are some things that I have put in a book for no reason. Like in my Kidnap and Ransom book, the heroine is a chef. And the reason I did that was because, you know, it ends up with them like in a closed situation where they don't have much access to food. And I wanted her to cook inventively. That's literally the only reason I did it. And then I wrote this scene where she goes to get her daughter back at this ransom situation, and she hears her daughter tapping on the underside of the boot. And months and months and months later, I interviewed a chef, and I was chatting to him about how he feels about food and how, you know, what keeps you awake at night, like what do you cook when nobody's looking, and all of those like writer questions. And I said to him, like, what's your weirdest anecdote about cooking? And he said, everybody thinks lobsters scream when they go in the pot, but actually they tap the underside of the lid. And this metaphor is now imbued throughout that novel. But like, how does the mind know? It's so weird, isn't it?
It's so weird. And you can't make it happen.
No, you can't. And when it doesn't work, it's very frustrating because there is no solution. It's like alchemy, like, you know, you can't manufacture it, can you?
And because we know that, does that sometimes, and then we'll take one more question and then we'll be finished. I'll let you go to your real life. Because you can't make it happen, does that give you the impetus just to go on because when it's meant to be, it will be?
Yeah, like I've got a really high concept book that I'm currently writing. It's about spies, and but it's spies done my way. So it's around the kitchen sink, you know, and it's so high concept, but I'm really struggling with it. And I've worked up a synopsis that I'm not that happy with, and now I've just thought I'm just going to dive in. And actually, I've got this working document called "What is Working in the Spies Book." That's literally all it says, and I'm just writing in it like, I liked this scene, it worked. And by the end of a draft, I'm going to have a trash draft. I've accepted that. I very often do. And but I do have intel. And that does help with the unfolding process, I think.
I am so sad that we have to stop.
I know. I could talk all night about this stuff.
And I'm hoping that you all in the audience, you crime timers, are won over by this book. I certainly am, and could not recommend it more highly. Famous Last Words, out today in the US by Gillian McAllister. One of you fabulously lucky people will win it as we spin the wheel of fun. The rest of you, you know what to do. Run, 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 click, click, click. However you get your books, do not miss this novel. Let's just see who is going to win today. Look at all those names of people who are here. That's marvelous. And somebody's about to be very lucky, and that is Alexander Ida. I think you may be in the UK or overseas somewhere. So let's deal with that when the time comes. Let's pick one more in case we need to send one locally. We'll take care of you, Alexander, though, no question about it, some way. And a local winner might be Deborah Press. Terrific. I know that she lives in the US. So Alexander, we will handle this. Deborah, we will get you your book. And Mighty Blaze is asking, does your dad ever hear the spoilers first? And does he mind?
Oh yes, he does hear them. Yeah. I mean, he hears the 10 things I'm not going to do.
I want that list of 10 things you're not going to do.
Yeah.
I love that. I actually do that myself. I'm going to let you go. Let me say that next week we will have Marie Benedict with the Queens of Crime. Talk about a high concept idea, you all. This is Agatha Christie and Nio Marsh and Dorothy Sayers solving a real crime. I mean, I have to say, I wish I would have thought of that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Isn't it super? So we will talk to Marie Benedict next week at 4 p.m. here on Crime Time. This week we have been talking to the fabulous Gillian McAllister about famous last words and Wrong Place, Wrong Time. I'm going to get these both on the screen. Do not miss these books, Crime Timers. You will absolutely love them, as I did. Gillian, thank you again for a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
And we will see you all next time. And remember, till next Tuesday, it is always safe inside a book. And we'll see you next time.